us today as well. Um, we don't have any time for questions, and I think we are going to move on to our keynote speaker, Jennifer Jewell. Jennifer, if you want to turn on your video and join us. So Jennifer Jewell is the creator and host of Cultivating Place, Conversations on Natural History and the Human Impulse to Garden, an award-winning national public radio program and podcast. She is also author, most recently, of What We Sow on the personal, ecological, and cultural significance of seeds. Her greatest passion is elevating and expanding the way we talk about the culture of gardening, the empowerment of gardeners, and the possibility inherent in the intersection between places, environments, cultures, individuals, and the gardens that bring them together beautifully for the benefit of all the lives on this generous planet. Welcome, Jennifer, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen. And what an incredible honor to be here, and what an incredible and humbling honor to listen to Secretary Holland and Director Stone Manning about the incredible work that they are doing. So thank you to both of them. It's humbling to be speaking right after them. I want to thank also the Institute for Applied Ecology and the Native Seed Network for convening this gathering together these 2 days. It is, again, an honor to be here joining those speaking, but also those listening, learning, and being energized by these proceedings. It's sort of like a metaphysical seed swap, if you will. We know from recent evidence that humans have been selecting, planting, altering, and adapting seed for more than 14,000 years. But the cultural seed keepers among us would likely bear witness that this relationship of responsibility and reciprocity, of synergy and symbiosis, stretches back in all likelihood for hundreds of thousands of years. We stand in a rich, long history here. Today, I want to share a little bit about my own exploration into the importance of seed, not by way of teaching you all anything you don't know, but by way of celebrating you, of centering you, and reminding you and us all of the critical importance and incredible beauty and potential of what you do, of what you sow in tending native seed. As noted, I'm the founder and host of Cultivating Place, a nationally syndicated public radio program and podcast, which since 2016 has held dear a mission of elevating and expanding the way we as a mainstream culture think and talk about gardening. I believe that gardeners and gardens are powerful, intersectional agents and spaces for positive change. At our very best, we as gardeners and land and plant stewards and partners, including all of you, can grow our worlds better environmentally, socially, economically, and spiritually. I produce Cultivating Place from the unceded traditional and present homelands of the Mechoopda Maidu of the Chico Rancheria, whose voices I have and will continue to feature on Cultivating Place. I believe that biodiversity in the garden and in the truth of who gardeners have always been is a key. The human impulse to garden is shared by people and cultures across time and space, whether or not they use the word garden. The human impulse to garden is both a gift and a responsibility, a truth so beautifully re-ingrained into our collective consciousness by Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. But over the past 75 years or so, many of us have too frequently abdicated the responsibility of this gift to a mainstream media and marketing machine that has diminished this gift into a two-dimensional consumer activity focused on a commodified object. When in truth, most people I know tending their land and plants, and therefore their communities, express this human impulse to garden as a lifelong relationship. I believe you all, intending native seed ethically and ecologically, are such gardeners, engaged in such lifelong relationships. And here too, diversity is and has always been a seed for success. So given who I am and what I do, a lifelong gardener, the daughter of a professional gardening mother and a wildlife biologist father, no one was more surprised than me than when in 2020, March of 2020 specifically, you all remember March of 2020, right? My partner John and I went to order seeds, and we were met with messages, like many of us were, of out of stock, back ordered, unavailable. This triggered a very real primal fear around survival. But also, it triggered for me an understanding that as much as I thought I knew, there was so much more I didn't know about the state of seed in our world. I was as plant blind and seed stupid as anyone. And as a caring gardener, this lack of attention and understanding was irresponsible. And yet another abdication, making me complicit in ways of being I don't want to be complicit in. My garden, too. I don't want my garden complicit in that. I can do better than that. We can all do better than that. And all of you and us here today are proof of that. The several-year project I then undertook in response to that fear and recognition went about reviewing what I did know and trying to delve into, untangle, and understand what I didn't know about the state of seed. Who grew them, where and when and how? Who supplied them? Who legislated them and controlled them? Who was watching out for them? And why does this matter to everyone, from native seed growers and sowers to home gardeners and just plain humans everywhere? Because I figured if I didn't know these things, there were others who didn't know this as well. And they, like me, actually wanted to know. So I started by asking myself, what exactly is seed? And the answer, first and foremost, let us never forget, is that seed is nothing short of miraculous. It is to our physical world what a Messiah is to our religious worlds. It is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, and the beginning again. When we remember to stop and really think about the vast potential of just one seed, one acorn becoming a 250-year-old oak tree who sustains hundreds of generations of thousands of species in the shelter of its canopy and the resources of its expansive root system, we feel the power of that calculus in our guts and at our knees. When we work with seed, we're engaging with the very essence of life. And as a critical player in our clean air, clean water, food, even medicine, seed is at the heart of our very survival, intertwined with all that allows us to survive and thrive. As I write in the book, if earth, air, fire, and water are the first four primary elements, it has taken seed as the fifth element to make those first four actually equal life on earth here for us, both possible and pleasurable. Offered out by the plants and stewarded forward by plants, animals, and the elements across the millennia, seeds and their plants are a common inheritance. With them, we find a common ground, a common and magnificent cultural literacy we all share. Against these two baselines, I had to remind myself of the history of seed-bearing plants generally. And I'm not going to linger here very long because I know you all know this information. But I would point out growing concern over a staggering number of high school graduates in the US who cannot identify where seed is produced on some of our most common plants. I would use this as a cautionary tale that in our scientific and ecological rigor, you or we do not leave the larger part of us behind or out, but through conferences like this, through policy, communication, and outreach, we, like grandparents and grandchildren everywhere, bring along everyone possible. I would highlight too the incredible truth that these lives, these seeds and their plants have been co-adapting and evolving on this planet for 365 million years. These likely more than 300,000 species who comprise 80% of the plant life on the planet, they know things we don't know. They have plenty to teach us still. So perhaps one of the greatest lessons here is humility in the face of the seed and with one another. We should always be interrogating ourselves about what we know, how we think we know it, and how best and most respectfully to leverage that for the future. To remind ourselves that pollination ecology is about collaboration and coordination and harnessing the power of those with the elements and with our communities of wildlife. That seed is the fertilized ovule of the seed-bearing plant, carrying all that it needs to grow and all of its genetic adaptation and survival information in one tiny mobile packet, a formula that, harnessed to the elements and again to wildlife, has resulted in the greatest success story of life on Earth. The seeds and their dispersal mechanisms of the seed-bearing plants, with their dizzying array of architecture, engineering, and artistry, now characterize terrestrial life on the planet. And I want to emphasize again the relationship between seeds and animals in both pollination and dispersal. In this common squirrel's dinner on a stump in our backyard, we remember that seed are interdependent with the lives of all animals on the planet as well. Seed needs us, and we need them. We forget half of that equation at our own peril and the peril of many other lives here with us. Seeds hold and embody the mysteries and lessons of both dormancy and germination, which could equate to the lessons of rest, patience, close, careful listening, and persistence. In some cases, these lessons are held tightly by the seeds, and scientists such as Dr. Christina Walters at the USDA, among many others, continue to try to better understand these secrets. For instance, only recently are we understanding the importance of not just fire, but smoke to help break dormancy and trigger germination. And not just smoke in the air, but also smoke in the water. I'm sure many of you are putting this research to use for your fire-adapted seeds. And one of the takeaways here is, again, how much we have left to learn. Stay open to that. But we can know all of this biology, all of this history of this morphology and phenology, and we are still left with an incomplete story. And we must ask ourselves again, but what is seed in its fullness in our world? Yes, it's the extravaganza of one good wet winter after several years of drought, transforming brown California hillsides into a super bloom of annual and perennial wildflower diversity. Yes, they, the seeds, are the basis of ecosystems and ecosystem health and well-being for our forests, our wetlands, our mountains, our foothills, our valleys, and our coasts. So the next question for me became, what is the story of seed then as a result of it being in our hands? They are the basis of our favorite foods, our favorite flowers, herbs, medicines, utility, and art. They are the houses we live in, the clothes we wear. They perfume the prayers we offer to the universe. In one way, this is the greatest love story of all time. One of mutual flourishing, collaboration, interdependence, and super cool adaptation and evolution, all leading to seed abundance in culture, in food, in science, and in innovation. But in another way, and you know this, running right alongside this love story is another story, possibly the longest standing incidents of domestic violence and gaslighting of all time, all leading to something I can only call seed apartheid, characterized by extraction, abuse and diminishment and degradation. This has led, since the mid-1900s, to too many and too frequently overreaching seed patents, to controversial genetic engineering and modification rammed through an approval process perhaps not serving the best interests of the most of us, which are now pervasive in our commodity crops, notably the exact staple and sacred food crops of cultures throughout history. It has led to seed consolidation, to seed petrochemical applications for convenience, for profit, for control of people and land. The EPA and USDA acknowledge that everyone in the United States is exposed to pesticides on a regular basis. Chances are very good right here today, each one of us have pesticides in our blood and urine right now. This is the inevitable outcome of using over 1 billion pounds of pesticides each year in the US, nearly a quarter of the total pesticide use in the world. There are dozens of biocides, to use Rachel Carson's term, approved for agricultural applications in the US that are banned or in the process of complete phase out in the European Union, Brazil, and China. The Xerces Society, in their fight to advocate for the monarch butterfly, has been almost unable to find milkweed sold by a commercial nursery that does not have residual traces of neonicotinoids. This is what apartheid does. It separates, it isolates, it degrades, diminishes, it controls, or destroys. The love story here is nothing short of magic. And the other story, the tragedy, is nothing less than criminal. And all of us gathered here today have a say in how and where these stories go or don't go from here. Both the love story and the tragedy follow the long history of humans exchanging seed with one another. What has become the history of modern seed industry and seed commerce law, stretching back to the earliest spice and seed trade of thousands of years before the Common Era, to the ancestors of our seed catalogs of today, which we can find in the herbals of the Middle Ages, the florilegium of the wealthy and educated in the 1500s, during the ages of exploration, colonization, and improved mass printing, this brought about the earliest plant and seed catalogs of the 1600s, which led the way to the many catalogs of our era, and now our online catalogs. On the love story side of our storyline, this has given way to the great diversity of independent seed growers, sellers, and breeders in our world today. You can see even in John and my crazy seed drawer at home, some of the colorful diversity of US organic and independent food and flower seed growers preserving open pollinated, native, and heirloom varieties. These independent sellers, growers, and breeders are an important but precarious branch of seed security. And that security is held in whether the greatest number of them continue or fail. In this time of the sixth mass extinction, of unprecedented biodiversity loss, habitat loss, and our great desire to fight against this, this epic love story has led as well to the great cohort of people listening here today. The native plant seed conservators, growers, and distributors at all levels of society, from communities to the federal government. It is in the seed you tend that places are supported and restored. This is biodiversity added. This is water filtered and stored. This is carbon stored. This is habitat and habitat connectivity. This is economic circularity. This is climate resilience and cultural sanity. We're in something of a seed zeitgeist. In the last 3 weeks alone, John and I have noted headline articles related to the state of seed in the New York Times, in The Guardian, and The Economist. So thank you again, Secretary Holland and Director Stone Manning, for the meaningful native seed work of the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Land Management, and the long in development National Seed Strategy. Long needed, and some might say overdue, the zeitgeist is here now, and it's up to us to firmly root it into our collective sense of identity and what we value most. Because, of course, on the seed apartheid side of things, we have the unbelievable consolidation of the seed industry in just the last 30 years. A consolidation that has led to 4 international pharmaceutical and petrochemical companies controlling over 60% of the seed industry in our world. Stop for a second. Sit with the weirdness and the yuckiness of that thought for a second. Pharmaceutical and petrochemical companies controlling our ecosystem, health, and food security. Both storylines, seed abundance and seed apartheid, are also embedded in and run parallel to the history of seed banks. This is a picture of John's property following the devastating Camp Fire of November 2018, which destroyed the town of Paradise and burned his property, but not his house. The earth is charred in some places, and we were worried it was sterilized in a few because it burned so hot. But in others, of course, it was regenerated. 1 week post-fire, we got our first rain in 6 months, and the natural seed bank began to germinate. Amazing. Reminding us that the land itself is the first and most important, and if not damaged, the most efficient and resilient seed bank. The germination had 2 important takeaways. When we lose places and their ecosystem's health, we lose important seed banks. But the second takeaway is that nothing is binary. Not all good or all bad, not fire and not seed. Here, we of course are seeing native seed germinating, but we're also seeing the undaunted legacy of invasive plants, mostly introduced by colonizing, settler, even gardening humans like me. The point? Never lose sight of the fact that seed is powerful in both the positive and in the potentially destructive. Engage with seed with utmost respect, care, caution, and knowledge. In this time of colliding urgencies, I beg us all, you all, to take our time, do the homework of listening, observing, and learning from the land. The plants co-evolved with the land, and the people co-evolved with both, so that in our urgency to help, we do not make things worse. To a person, every leader of a seed bank I had the opportunity to interview, from John Dickey leading the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew in the United Kingdom, to Doctors Walters and Green at the USDA, and many others. To a person, they emphasize the conservation of seed places, in situ conservation, as the first and most important line of defense for the future of the world we want. But the story of human seed banking, ex situ conservation, is a fascinating tale of human endeavor. The story of large institutional and governmental seed banks starts with Russia's Vavilov Research Institute of Plant Industry, formerly founded in the 1920s. Soviet geneticist Nikolai Vavilov recognized the importance of collecting and preserving the most important crop seed genetics in order to safeguard the ability to feed people, to rid, he hoped, the world of famine through preserving not only the crop seed, but as many of the wild progenitors as he could. This seed bank is the place where, during the 2-year siege of Leningrad in World War II, scientists barricaded themselves into the seed bank in order to protect it from opposing forces, but also from starving citizens. The scientists went on to starve to death with food all around them in the form of seed, in order to preserve seed security of the future. Prior to large governmental seed banks, land-based communities across time and space have always saved, preserved, and strategically shared and planted their seed. The Native Seed Search Center in Tucson, Arizona, co-founded by ethnobotanist Gary Nabhan in the 1980s, strives to preserve the indigenous seed and crop diversity of the many peoples native to the Southwest. And as time has gone on, an unjust biodiversity and habitat loss and climate change have become the ongoing dirge of our times. Seed banks have evolved to include those specifically focusing on native seed in order to protect and preserve the integrity of distinct places for restoration now and in the future. One such example is the Dixon National Tallgrass Prairie Seed Bank at the Chicago Botanic Garden, preserving the biodiversity of the endangered tallgrass prairie ecosystems originally present from Canada all the way down to Texas. Dixon is just one of the 260 partnering seed banking efforts fostered by the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew's Millennium Seed Bank initiative, started in just in 2000. These two examples, Native Seed Search and the Tallgrass Prairie Seed Bank, highlight again that in order to preserve our, or even just one, culturally or economically important seed, we must preserve the wild biodiversity that led to that seed as we know it. We must preserve the wild progenitors. This is just one of the facets of the work you all are protecting in the ignition and amplification of native seed supply and restoration. This is a crucial overlap between nature and culture. We cannot always silo food security here and wild biodiversity there. They are intimately related. Today, there are over 1,500 large and mid-sized seed banks around the world. But of course, the charismatic mega seed bank of our time is the Global Seed Vault in Svalbard, Norway, an archipelago north of the Arctic Circle. This seed bank is the coming to fruition of a remarkable amount of collaboration and cooperation between governments and institutions and seed keepers. The goal of the vault is to safeguard seed against climate change and socio-political and economic ups and downs that have always endangered and plagued seed banks. If seed banks are backup copies of natural biodiversity, the Global Seed Vault is a pinnacle of elegant redundancy in being the backup copy of the backup copies. Opened in 2008, the need for seed security insurance at this level became almost immediately apparent between 2012 and 2014, when during the Syrian war, the seed bank of dryland crop diversity known as ICARDA, founded in the 1970s in Aleppo, Syria, came under attack and ultimately had to be abandoned. Thankfully, the historic collection under the care of Ali Shehada and his team had been backed up at the Global Seed Vault. By withdrawing their deposit, they were able to reconstitute the collection and continue their research and preservation mandates at two different sites, one in Lebanon and the other in Morocco. The takeaway here, redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. It is a lesson of the seeds. How many plants do you know put out just one seed? No. We put out as many seed as we can possibly get out. Another one of my favorite threads of inquiry into the fabric of the storyline leading to seed abundance is the establishment of seed libraries across the US and now across the world. These are based on the ideas of communal seed saving and swapping and sharing that go back centuries. But they are also based on the democratic ideals of a public library, in which written knowledge is stored and made accessible for everyone, free of charge, in the commons, as a birthright. This is one of the many ways we can reintroduce the fact and presence of seeds, native seed, food seed, flowering beauty seed, back into the everyday lives which have been divorced from these relations for too long. The first fully realized seed library in the form we think of them now was founded by Kay Green in Gardner, New York in 2004. He went on with his partner Doug to found Hudson Valley Seed. The story of seed libraries is just one of the stories of people reclaiming their relationship with and responsibility to seed, their access to seed, and seeds continuing to be part of our human commons. As of June 2020, there were nearly 1,400 self-identified seed libraries in the US, and many more sprouted during the pandemic. As Jeff Quattrone, who did this beautiful seed propaganda art here, founder of the New Jersey Seed Library Network and dedicated to collecting and preserving historic tomato breed diversity in New Jersey, pointed out to me in our interview, the larger the mainstream, Jennifer, the more room for the undercurrent. So power to the seed people, power to you. For the book, I collected research on seed people on the ground, stewarding and protecting the biodiversity of seed and how they have stewarded seed integrity from my first two books, from my podcast interviews, and many more which I conducted just for the book, What We Sow. These are all intertwined throughout the narrative in order to illuminate the many aspects and pathways contributing to seed abundance, biodiversity support, and cultural and climate resilience. Among these pathways are the availability and support of certified organic seeds, maintaining good hybrids as well as open pollinated and heirloom varieties, land and farmer care, as well as the preservation of ancient crop diversity, the importance of genetically diverse, sexually reproduced seed-grown native plants in the landscape industry, preserving and celebrating seeds of cultural significance in this age of many diasporas, and making these seedways visible and valued in our world. And of course, rematriating Indigenous seed and supporting Indigenous leaders and communities, reclaiming and teaching Indigenous ways of knowing to meet our social, economic, and dire environmental challenges. And native seed is interwoven into all of these. Over the next 2 days, you will hear so much more about many of these pathways, from the DNA Native Plants Program, from Satin Flowers Nursery on Vancouver Island, from the Wild Seed Project in Maine, and the new Northeast Native Seed Network, from the Native Plant Trust, from Wild Bird Trust, Coast Salish Plant Nursery on the West Coast, to the California Seed Strategy, to the Montana Native Seed Network, and semi-arid grassland seed support coming to us from the Denver Botanic Gardens. You will hear and learn from the science and stories of native seed success on public lands, in rural landscapes, cities, and suburbs. There are many pathways of the loving seed-based solutions growing and continuing to germinate in opposition to a storyline that would lead us to continued seed apartheid. But one of the greatest sources of optimism in the midst of all of this is the sheer number of you, seed people at work behind each of these seed solution, seed abundance pathways. Look at the registration of more than 900 of you for this conference. When you consider the world view of land-based people who hold seed as living beings, relatives, and ancestors, the tiniest forms of life embodying all of the biodiverse genetic, epigenetic, cultural, and environmental knowledge, blessings, and lessons of the past handed down to us in the present to steward forward for the future. And you compare that with the massive agro-industrial, petrochemical, profit-driven sector who would cover our seeds in toxic chemicals and sell them to the highest bidder, you cannot get worldviews that are more dramatically opposed. Perhaps I'm being dramatic, maybe, but can you think of a more dramatic contrast? Now is the inflection point in which we must choose a durable, moral ecology for the future. Perhaps one of my most poignant seed keeper interviews on the Cultivating Place program was back in 21 with Vivian Sansor. Founder of the Palestine Heirloom Seed Library, she works to identify, find, collect, preserve, and share as much of the biodiversity of her homeland's cultural and crop seed as humanly possible. In this exact moment of 2024, of course, Vivian is not smiling as she is here. She is rightfully outraged and heartbroken at the destruction being wrought to human, land, and plant diversity across this entire region, and horrified at the lack of global effort to stop it. But this is the way of apartheid. With that said, one of the things I want you to note is that in her work on behalf of SEED back in 2021, look at the joy on this woman's face. It is a reminder that we do not do this work only because of the urgencies in front of us. We do this work because of the beauty and joy, divinity even, brought to us through these seed lives we engage with. Knowing what we are growing for, as well as what we are growing against, is ballast for us all in this uphill work. Fight injustice with all of your might, but find your joy with all you have too. This quote from Vivian remains a mantra for me. These are trying times, but they are also opportune times, calling us to ask ourselves how mediocre or how brave we want to be. We have the choice. So what is it going to be? Mediocre or brave? Because I'll tell you what, we have mediocre and worse down pat. We are losing species at an unprecedented rate. We are warming and drying and disrupting the climate of our planet at an unprecedented rate. We have mediocre down. How long are we going to tend 40 million acres of overwatered, overmown, overgrown, oversprayed, non-native monoculture turf grass in this country? Oh, we have mediocre down in habitat destruction for large-scale agriculture, in seed patents, in continuing to consolidate and isolate and privatize for profit so much of what should be in the commons, in continuing to maintain an arsenal of toxic chemicals, destroying our soil, our water, our insects, and our health, available to you right now in a big box store, in your hardware store, even wherever you pick up your groceries. We wonder where our pollinators have gone. The answer is right in front of us. We have killed them with our overuse and underregulation of big industry profitable chemical cocktails. And here's the thing. We know we can do so much better. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave. We can be this beautiful, biodiverse, and brave. It is you on the ground doing this kind of seed work, policy work, education and restoration work, and connecting this work across the continent and the world that is carrying us all forward. You are literally and figuratively sowing the ground before us better. And I know too the importance of me and people like me multiplied by what we now know are 100 million gardening households. We know the importance of putting these boots, our dollars, our votes and understanding, and the power of our gardens, large and small, to work, making your work easier. All of you here today, plus me, plus everyone like me, can grow our world in the direction we want it to grow. You, we are all the people who can seed this change forward, away from apartheid, back to abundance. Many blessings on your work. Many blessings on these 2 days together and beyond, continuing to steer this love story in constant service to biodiversity, beauty, and bravery. Thank you so much for the time to be here with you today. It is an honor, and now I am excited to be a listener.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for that extremely wonderful and powerful presentation. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions, maybe one or two, and I'll be pulling them from the Q&A icon box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you see a question you'd like answered, please upvote it, and that will get the most likes and it'll be moved to the top. Okay, Jennifer, the first question for you is, in seed banks, do the seeds ever get planted out and replenished with new seed?
Oh, yes, definitely. One of the enduring protocols of all seed banks are the testing, grow out, and replenishment protocols. And they are, of course, different in different seed banks based on the kind of seed that the bank is focused on, based on their capacity, and based on the different seeds they're working with. As you well know, a date palm apparently can live for 2,000 years, and in a bank called a tomb, whereas others will only last for a season or a few seasons. So yes, this is international standard in seed banking.
Great, thank you. I think that's going to be all the time that we have for questions at the moment. If you have any other questions, I'll be moving them into the Q&A box in Whova so that the speakers can answer throughout the conference. And I'll pass it over to Alexis.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. And thank you so much, Jennifer, for that truly inspiring and motivating talk. The chat box is just blowing up with appreciation for you as well. And if you haven't already listened, we did interview with Jennifer Jewell for her podcast, myself, Morgan Franke, and Tom Kay with IAE. So if you're interested in a little bit of more information and hearing her wonderful podcast, check out that episode and more.